I'd like to call the November 20th Wilton Board of Education meeting to order at this time. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the agenda?
Yes.
I have a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. As we do at the beginning and end of every meeting, we have a time for public comment. If there's anybody from the public that would like to come up and speak to the board, now would be an appropriate time.
Over there.
Please come right up here and
Have a seat.
have a seat. Make yourself
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Yep.
Should be comfortable.
Don't be so formal.
State your name.
My name is Carrie Tobias. I was involved in the recent email campaign concerning parent-teacher conference days, and I would first like to thank the Board of Education and the administration for their decision to reinstate 2 of the half days to full days. I'm the mother of a 9th grader and a 4th grader, and I am a concerned parent. When I felt that the administration was making a mistake, I needed to do something about it. Because of Sandy, we all had to adjust our schedules and make accommodations. However, it did not seem as if the administration was keeping up with the changes that other hard-hit districts were making. All the parents I spoke with also felt that their children's best interests were not being addressed. We were very pleased that our voices were eventually heard. The administration made the correct choice to reverse their decision. I hope that this administration will continue to seek the opinions of the parents of Wilton. I know that you will be addressing more calendar issues tonight, as well as permanent changes to the half-day parent-teacher conference schedule. Parents would like to have a voice in those decisions. There needs, I feel, to be more opportunities for Wilton parents to communicate with the Board of Education. Surveys, town hall meetings, open forums, and other direct means of communication would all be welcome. The parents of this town are very involved in their children's educations and would like to have an administration and Board of Education that is creative, progressive, and proactive in their thinking. We welcome the opportunity to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to speak at this time? We greatly appreciate the feedback, and we want people to know that we definitely hear it and take it into consideration. At this point, has everybody had a chance to see the consent agenda? A motion to approve the consent agenda? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We moved the action items up to an earlier part of our meeting today in hopes that it would work out better for one of our board members. As things would work out, she's not here. But our first action item is discussion of the calendar revisions, and that is on for discuss and approve, and it's to adjust for Sandy, I believe.
Well, in the way of review, I would just like to quickly remind the board of the administration's recommendation to revise the calendar for this school year as a result of the storm. The recommendation, as you may recall, is to add a shortened day for February 4th, which formerly was scheduled as a professional development day. We're of the mindset that this needs to be a shortened day in that we have obligations to meet with our staff for professional development that afternoon. We then are proposing, as part of our recommendation, that we eliminate the last 3 days of the February vacation and restore them to school days, and then to add 2 days to the end of the school calendar. And from that point on, each snow day would add days to the end of the year. And if we were to accumulate 5 additional snow days, that would be the point at which we would need to go into the April vacation. So within this recommendation, we're obviously saying our prayers that we don't need more than 4 snow days if the board were to accept the recommendation. So again, just as a friendly reminder, the advantages in our estimation as it relates to this recommendation is we recapture 3 days in the February break, which does provide a teaching and learning opportunity, particularly before high-stakes exams in March, state-mandated exams, the Connecticut Mastery Test, the Connecticut Academic Performance Tests. It does give us greater flexibility to deal with storm-related closures at the end of the school year.
Okay, I'll open it up to questions. I know we've received a number through the Board of Ed email alias, and we all have some of our own. Laura, can we start with you? Or do you want to start over here with Laura?
Let's start with Lori.
Why, thank you, Laura. Well, actually, I'm glad we didn't vote on this at the last meeting because at that time I was leaning towards supporting the recommended proposal, but having given it more thought and having heard some more input from people in the town, I've reconsidered my position. And one of the second alternative that was given, alternative proposal number 2, I felt the last time around we really didn't spend much time at all actually discussing that as a possibility. But in truth, I believe it might be our best option at this point. And the one thing that I was trying to keep in mind, and I think we all should keep in mind, is that as we look to restore days, it's not a matter of, well, where can we just plug them in and make up the days, but that they should be meaningful instructional days as much as possible. And I strongly feel that to put any of those days in the February break, they would not be meaningful instruction days, because I really feel that we're going to have a high level of absenteeism. I think we put parents at in a precarious situation where now they're going to try to decide, do I cancel my trip or do I pull my kids from school? And I did receive one interesting email just, I think it was yesterday, from a woman who said, listen, it's our family position that you do not miss school unless you're sick. They don't do mental days, mental health days. They don't pull them out for vacation. No reason, because they're trying to build this good work ethic in their kids, that school is important, and if school's open, that's where you're supposed to be. And so this family in particular would be left with the decision, do we cancel our vacation, or do I pull you from school? And that's become a dilemma for them. And I think that there's many other parents out there. Now, as far as adding them, and I would support adding them to the end of the school year because of a couple of reasons. First of all of our alternatives at this point take us into the week of June 17th, and it makes June 22nd the graduation date in all of these options. The other thing about adding days to the end of the year, some might argue, well, they're not very productive days because they're the end of the school year. But in my experience, 10 years now in the Witten school system, I think school in May and the beginning of June is a very serious school time, and a lot of rigorous work is being done, I think, until you hit that 2-week mark. And then things start to lighten up, maybe not so much for the high schoolers because they're still prepping for exams and that sort of thing. So in my mind, whether the last day of school was May 1st or July 1st, you're going to hit that 2-week mark, and then things might, especially at the lower levels or whatever. So I think those are valuable days to add to the end of the school year, and it leaves February untouched. And gives us the 8. Now, I would have proposed, before I got all these emails, that any snow days prior to February come off of February, any snow days after February come off of April. But again, with giving some of the feedback I got from parents, and I'm even a little iffy about the whole February 4th thing being a half day, because my concerns are how productive that day will be. But I'm willing to support that for now, but I think that's something going forward we should think about as well. So my support is for alternative proposal number 2 at this point. Thanks for listening. That's a long explanation. Sorry.
But you brought up a lot of good points that we saw in emails from parents as well. Karen, thoughts?
I think I am inclined to support the administration's proposal because I think it's the most educationally sound. It provides a needed break in February, even though that is only a 4-day weekend. It gives us some flexibility in terms of additional snow days, and I unfortunately do think that there will be more than just a couple. I think it's important for the summer programs that the district runs, as well as some of the programs that our students are engaged in during the summer, and for those kids who work, to have school out as early as possible so that all of those things can go forward as planned. And at this particular point in time, the recommended proposal does preserve April vacation.
Yeah, my feelings are almost exactly opposite Lori's. Having gone through this every year for the last 6 or 7 years, there's always a split, and I think they're split along the same lines as we are here tonight. I feel strongly that the April vacation, the February vacation should be shortened. I think I've always felt that February is a good time to be in class, and I think as a result of the CAP tests, I think that's a good time to remove the vacation days. As for the end of the year, I do think that when June comes around, that school one's mind tends to wander, and I think the more school days we can keep prior to June, certainly the better. So I'd support the administration's recommendation.
Okay, well,
See, I bet you wish you went first
No.
now, right?
No, I'm leaning more towards the alternative number one. And again, parents' emails as well as, and full disclosure, my children are older. They're in the, they're not in grade school anymore. Grade school parents might feel differently. I feel that there's this kind of, I believe that if we were to tack on days to the end of the year, that if teachers are teaching, children will learn. Like, I really think that, yes, we all like to, play it out, but I don't think that going until the end, through that 21st date, is a problem for either, for the education of our children. However, I would be nervous using up that week right off the bat. I mean, I understand that's what you're all coming up with when you're taking off, whether it's to take away from February or from April, because you don't want to kind of, have nowhere to go if we have more snow days during the school year. I kind of feel like at the high school level, and again, I'm speaking towards older children, like they come back from April vacation and they go right into AP exams, and there's just kind of this, like, I feel like they never get their bearing. And so in some ways, if they didn't have that break right like post-cap, pre-AP, it's just kind of, I feel like the seniors are leaving. I think it's very disruptive, and so I'd rather see it taken away from April vacation just to...
So that was what? That was
The
alternative
one
proposal
between,
two then?
Yes.
No,
Like
No,
one.
one. There's the recommended, there's
This
one
one.
and two.
Oh, I'm
And
looking
my
at-
problem with the number two alternative is that I would be
Okay, I see
nervous
what you're saying.
putting all the June days, filling up that week in June. Though I understand what the administration is saying. And
Right, I would be inclined to either do the one or two. I guess in agreement with Laura, I think the February one is the week that should be untouched. Right? I mean, ultimately, isn't that what you're saying?
yes.
Okay.
But I also, am,
Yeah.
I'm confused. What a shocker. But just because I think that it's one of these situations, like the
Yeah.
shortened days for the parent-teacher conferences. I mean, it's such a different, when you're talking about young children and the grade schools, they have totally different needs at different times of years, and so and that's why I want to disclose my kids are older, and so.
I think they're tough points that we wrestle with. We look at whether we take it out of February, whether we take it out of April, or we take it out of the end of the year. And I know that we've read a lot of emails across the town on point counterpoint on all three of those. My family's going to get affected no matter what decision we make, as I'm sure every family in Wilton is. And I'm not sure that I have a crystal ball to be able to say what's best for everyone. And I think that's a challenge. I see the benefits of saying we've come off of Christmas break. Do we really need a break in February, which is going to feel right on the heels of Christmas? I see the argument for what if we say we're going to be in school in February and it snows, and people could have gone away but didn't. That's going to be a challenge. I see the points on not wanting to extend the school year because there's a tremendous amount of work that we do at the end of the year. And Laura, I hadn't thought about your point about testing at the end of the year, but I could see how that could be disruptive as well. Yet we have to make up these days. Sandy was not something we asked for. We need to move forward with a thoughtful decision on this. And I'll tell the community, I'm not sure what the right answer is. And this is a hard one. Absent that,
I'm sorry, I did
Yes.
just want to make a point, and I'm sorry for being out of order. I did just want to restate what was shared in Friday notes, that the WEA, our largest employee union, our teachers, are in support of the recommended proposal.
thank you.
Just want to make sure that that's been heard.
Have they seen all the proposals?
Yes.
Okay.
Did Chris provide input for consideration tonight?
She
Officially?
did,
I
but
mean, I know.
she's not here to vote,
Okay,
so
all right,
she's
so
not
it doesn't-
making too
okay.
about it.
May I ask a question? Just
Sure.
like, so the February 4th shortened day, does that provide the teachers with enough time to do what you had planned?
From a professional development standpoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And that does give us a day back.
Yeah,
It does.
It helps
Right.
us, we have 6 days.
And we're still at 181 at this point, correct? Based on all of this feedback, do you have any thoughts on wiggle room? Any other alternatives we didn't look at that might help take some of this consideration into account? And I know that's a tough question, but
I think we tried to look at it many different ways. I mean, you could get to a point, and I've sat through board discussions and other lives that are, where you end up with 18 options, and it becomes somewhat of a circus when you're looking at that. You could do all sorts of things where you're taking a day from April, a day from February, and bouncing back and forth. And I think we've tried to say, how do you do what we think is best for instruction? How do you try to do something that parents can have some ability to plan for, and teachers to plan for? And that's where we came up with the options that we developed. We didn't spend, and it's true, we didn't spend a lot of time on alternate proposal number 2. And one of the things that we talked about with that one was the fact that, as Karen indicated, there's a lot that goes on in the summer, from the ESY to trying to have some days prior to July where you do some much-needed curriculum mapping and curriculum work. The building projects where Karen and I were at a meeting earlier this week, yesterday as a matter of fact, where we were working on the project, meeting with architectural firms. She'll probably talk about that later, about the significant remodeling of the bathrooms that's going to take place in this summer. And we need as much time as we can to get that project done, because there's a huge project. So that's a factor that kind of weighed in our thinking about the alternate 2.
And if I may, just to add to that, that concern is based on experience, on what happened last year. As you may recall, we had to go into that week.
Right.
And granted, there was some professional development work that had to occur in that very last week of June. But we learned some lessons about the challenges of, number one, closing this high school, and our obligation to turn over transcripts in a timely manner. We acknowledge that we could lose these days anyways with our recommendation, but to have that flexibility does take pressure off the high school to turn over transcripts for our graduating seniors. That was a big challenge for our high school. The launch of the ESY program was very challenging last summer. It was a major factor. And as Dr. Richards mentioned, the other considerations around facilities, summer curriculum work,
sadly,
all created some issues for us in trying to manage what became a very short summer.
And I think for staff too, those staff who work, the later you go in the year, the staff who do work in the ESY program and other programs, that's a very small window for them to get some time away. So that's something that is a concern.
Whatever proposal we adopt, what I like what you have done is you have spelled out exactly what happens, so there will be no question in anyone's mind where that snow day is coming from. And should we start having the snow days, I think we should put up on the website, this now means.
right. It does raise the need, perhaps, in years going forward to further detail our plans.
Mhm.
When Sandy's ugly sister comes along next year.
Cheerful.
Jane, did the WEA provide any comment as to why they supported this proposal?
They thought it made sound educational purpose in terms of when we were placing our instructional time with our students. They certainly see value in the half-day on February 4th for the professional development. And they also believe that it was important to get the days, to make up the days earlier rather than later in the year and still allow us some flexibility should there be more inclement weather.
I think those are good points. Okay.
Can I just ask a
Any
quick
additional
clarifying
thoughts?
question about Tim, what you were just saying? So what I took from that is it's really important to keep that last week of June school definitely be done by then, because that gives the staff time to get the transcripts out and to get the ESY up and running and the school
curriculum.
building projects.
And
Okay.
curriculum,
And
too, yeah.
Okay.
We've done a lot of mapping and kind of because
Right.
we're behind on that initiative. That's a good time. You start to lose people in July.
I understand, yes. No, I understand.
We have to be cautious in how we state that, though, because if we have 4 or 5 snow days,
Right.
we're going to be right
Yeah.
back here eating
Okay,
We acknowledge
snow
that.
walls.
We
Yes.
acknowledge that.
right.
Right. Okay. Lori, any other thoughts?
No, I think I still stand very strong about my feelings about the February break. I just don't feel good about those being school days at this late date. I just feel the absenteeism will be just too high to make them worthwhile days. But I could support, as Laura does, the proposal, which adds just a couple days more at the end of the year and then takes some days from the April break. I would support that one. That's where I'm at this point.
Any other thoughts on that?
I think it's a long haul to go from January to April without it.
Which one?
Well, it's a long haul to go without any breaks, and I'm not sure where the best place is to place them. I'm comfortable with the fact that we have a long weekend in March, a 4-day weekend in February under the administration's proposal, then a 3-day weekend at the end of March, and then an April break, because you do need to break that up for mental health and sometimes just to break a flu cycle.
Right. Okay, is it possible that if we do end up taking the dates out of February right now, that the alternative based on educational need is to take additional snow days in April instead of the end of the year as our next step? Cringe, I'm just asking a question.
But if we take, going with the recommended proposal, we have a few days we could take at the end of the year.
No, we do.
I mean,
And still stay within that week.
Okay.
and I was, sorry. You know, what the administration says and what the teachers say are really important because they are the professionals, and I want to be sensitive to parents, but ultimately, if it's best for the education of our children to go with the recommended proposal, I would back the administration and the teachers.
I think we all recognize, too, that this is not an easy decision. Somebody's going to be unhappy. Somebody's going to be hurt. But can I have a motion to accept the administration's proposal?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? It carries. Thank you. Okay, we now have 2 resolutions on the table for this evening. There are 2 significant projects in front of the town that the Board of Ed has been asked to weigh in on. So we've decided to do such in form of resolution. One is relative to the Board of Selectmen's fiber optic capital project, and the other one is relative to the Board of Selectmen's Yankee Gas Line extension project. how should we best present these? Do you want to read them? Do you want me to read them?
I'll be happy, whatever your pleasure. The first resolution, as Mr. Likely said, deals with it's a resolution concerning the fiber optic capital project. Whereas the Board of Education of the Town of Wilton, the Board has had the Board and administrative representation on the Townwide Network Joint Study Committee charged with a review of the fiber optic project proposed by the Board of Selectmen, and whereas the Board believes that the project has many benefits and that it will provide a secure, redundant network between all of our schools, the town, and the Wilton Library Association, create the possibility of shared computer services between the town, schools, and library, enable the Board to avoid a cost of having a third party host the school's backup solution, $28,800 per year, or $576,000 over the 20-year life of the bond, ensure a secure, high-speed connection between our video security system and the Wilton Police Department, allow schools and other town entities to function from town facilities when needed. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Board of Education supports the project on this basis and encourages the Board of Selectmen to move the project forward to the voters, consistent with the requirements of the Wilton Town Charter, adopted by the Board, should you so choose, at its meeting of November 20th, 2012.
You want to have some discussion on this? Thoughts, comments?
I admit that I was one of the people who didn't like the original language and have worked to change it to the language that Dr. Richards has just read, so I'm comfortable with it as it stands. We are, if we adopt this resolution, we are adopting it saying that there are benefits to the Board of Education that we recognize, but we are also recognizing that it's a Board of Selectmen project and that they should move it forward according to whatever their processes are, and we'll be happy to support them to the extent that it benefits us.
Good. Thank you. Laurie, thoughts? Laura? No.
The amendment that we've received, is that, there is some language, which amendment? Which did you read?
Clean copy.
This one's
Behind it.
Okay, because,
The other was
but this does not specify the committee charge, and we're talking about.
This is the clean copy that he read.
Ah,
Oh.
okay, so that is,
The last page of that,
Of the
where the
staple.
red is, the
Oh.
last page there.
okay.
Except they still spelled the name wrong, Bruce. Oh, no, they spelled it right this time.
Try it this one.
Okay.
It's under C.
Yeah.
what?
It's under 1C and 1C.
Questions?
Yeah. No, it's important.
Support? Okay. Can we have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful.
The second resolution has to do, it's a resolution of the Wilton Board of Education concerning the Yankee Gas Line Extension Project, November 20th, 2012. Whereas the Board of Education of the Town of Wilton, the Board has a strong commitment to seeking more cost-effective ways to operate its schools, and whereas the Board believes that the conversion of school heating systems from oil-fired to natural gas could result in significant energy savings at all town schools over time, and whereas the Board would like to ensure that all of its 4 schools, Miller Driscoll, Cider Mill, Middlebrook, and Wilton High School, are connected to the Yankee gas pipeline. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Wilton Board of Education respectfully requests that the Board of Selectmen ensure that the plan to extend the Yankee gas line includes all 4 Wilton Public School campuses, adopted, should you decide to do so, by the Wilton Board of Ed at its meeting November 20th, 2012.
Questions, thoughts, comments?
No, I'd move that we accept it.
Absolutely.
Second?
Agreed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful. At this point, we move on to reports and recognition. I just have a few very brief comments. This past Friday, the Wilton Board of Education participated in the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education and Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents annual conference in Mystic, Connecticut. That is the board's opportunity for professional development. Literally every school district across the state is represented. Most of its board members and most of its superintendents are there. We get educational sessions that range from finance to curriculum to professional development. There's a large vendor fair where people come in and talk to us about what services and resources they can provide to the district and assisting us in running our district more effectively. And I have to say, one of the highlights of the event was Cave and Caps announces their annual Superintendent of the Year. And Wilton was blessed with having Dr. Richards named Superintendent of the Year for 2013. I think that this represents... I think that this represents not only a distinguished career, but also the gifts that he's given to Wilton over these past 8 years and also to the entire state of Connecticut. This award came about because the Board of Ed nominated Dr. Richards, much to his chagrin. He was not feeling as though it was appropriate. We felt otherwise. We believe that this is an incredible district built on a history of quality, a history of openness, fairness, and integrity. And we greatly appreciate all that you've done for us and feel that your peers have proven what we already know. And we cannot thank you enough. I do want to note that the Wilton Education Foundation had their spelling bee this past Friday night. I understand that was an enjoyable event. And with that, Dr. Richards.
Thank you. When I told my 90-year-old mother about my award, her first question was, "How much money did you get?" And I told her, I said, "Well, Mom, I don't get any money." She said, "You don't?" I said, "No, but it's a great honor, and I mean that, so I appreciate that." The check's in the mail. But I do want, as I talked to a couple reporters who asked me about it, I think that awards like this really come from the kind of support that we receive in this community, from parents, from organizations like the Foundation, certainly from years of selfless, tireless, hardworking board members, and from a great administrative and professional team. So it's a great honor, and I hope I can be worthy of that honor. So, this past on Veterans Day, we do hold school on Veterans Day, and I'm very proud of the fact we have school. So I'm asked often by colleagues around the state, how were you able to do that? And it's something that has been a tradition in Wilton for a long time, and our belief has been, and I think still is, that we can use this day to help youngsters appreciate the true meaning of it far more than they might get from being at home or doing other kinds of activities that don't acknowledge the contribution of Veterans Day. And with that in mind, our schools, I think, did a terrific job once again this year. I'll just briefly run through. Millard Driscoll had 2 assemblies for all the K-2 students. They generally have some wonderful and enthusiastic singing. It's one place you can go as an adult and sing along because everybody has no fear of how they sound, and it sounds great. They had a video tribute to our veterans. A book called Veterans Day was read by our terrific assistant principals, and guest speaker Robin Reeves. Mrs. Reeves spoke about veterans in our community, and as you know, her husband is a veteran who served in Iraq. Teachers also provided a variety of veterans activities and books in their classrooms. So I think our youngest students were able to get a nice introduction to the meaning of Veterans Day. at Cider Mill, and again, Cider Mill, along with all of our schools, has a nice tradition as well. Principal Jenny Rico reported that we had approximately 50 veterans in attendance. I'm always impressed that the veterans can wear the uniforms they wore back in the some of them back into the Korean, and in my age, the Vietnam vets. I can't wear stuff from a couple of years ago. That's another story. But we're pleased that also we've had in past years, Senator Boucher has spoken this year, and Representative Gail Lavelle has attended. She participated, I believe, this year. We had a young man who's a recruit in the United States Marine Corps talk about and visited classrooms and talked about his experiences and what led him to join the service, to serve our country. PE teacher Barbara McCosey read an essay on her father-in-law's experience as a prisoner of war in World War II following the D-Day invasion, and she really connected the themes of the assembly in her talk to students about service and the meaning of service to our country and the freedoms that we are defending through that service. As is the case throughout our district, the music program contributes in many, many ways, and once again, in spite of limited days of rehearsal, the Cider Mill Singers and the 5th grade chorus gave terrific presentations. Third graders are the youngest students at Cider Mill, helped organize some of the behind-the-scenes work that you need to pull off an event like this. Welcome signs, leading the guests to the registration, greeting and seating our veterans, and narrating the assembly. The community building initiative really tied into some of the work we're doing with Responsive Classroom. And teachers began working on that last year. They have been doing that at Miller Driscoll prior to that. They've been doing it for a while. At Middlebrook, Julia reports the Veterans Day program included a variety of activities developed by our social studies and music departments to honor our veterans. The day began with a video tribute created by 8th grade student Jackson Worley and musical selections by our flute choir. 6th grade student Alex Stroop read his poem, The Life After Life, and 8th grade student Brooke, Amadei, read her poem, Two Empty Boots. And in past years I've shared these poems with the board, and they're terrific, and I believe they're on your website, if I'm not mistaken, Julia. Veterans were honored in the classrooms and throughout team assemblies. They had an opportunity to hear taps, and the 8th grade chorus performed Unsung Hero in the afternoon. 7th grade, at dismissal time, Lydia Hoffman read her poem, 7th grade student. And a new focus for this day, I'm going to report on that in a moment, was a collection of items for the Nick Medeiros House. And once again, I think the Veterans Day events at Middlebrook were poignant and memorable. At Wilton High School, in addition to Veterans Day conversations in classrooms, Wilton High School featured Vet Day posters in the foyer and Veterans Day announcements on our TV monitors. The Morning Warrior student news broadcast on our closed circuit TV included an appropriate message honoring those who served and those who continue to serve, followed by a quiet moment of reflection. So again, I really believe that our veterans in the community, I've talked to them each year, certainly the principals have, this means a great deal to them. And I think we honor their service wonderfully here. I mentioned a moment ago how Middlebrook students use this day as a way of giving back. You're all familiar with the Kick for Nick, the soccer balls that are collected in the front of the village market, next to the store, next to the village market for the business. And in addition to that, the Medeiros family has been working on something called the PFC, Nicholas Medeiros Supply Drive. And the purpose of this drive was to gather supplies for some of the homeless veterans in Connecticut. There is a home that they have, I believe it's in Bridgeport, and Middlebrook students organized this. They made posters, they did a video editing for Good Morning Middlebrook, newscasts. They updated the headline page. They did a lot of preparatory work, gathering boxes for the donations. And although Hurricane Sandy kind of left an unmistakable path across our town, children extended the drive an extra week so that they could raise more supplies. And these included toiletries, gloves, mittens, hats, some food items that will go to the veterans' home. In addition to this, the 6 Yellow team spent some time writing letters to the veterans, thank you notes to the veterans who would be receiving these donations. And I think we're all aware, you see it in the news almost every night at this time of year, particularly the veterans talking about the appreciation, gestures of appreciation. And I think coming from young people is particularly important for them. Yesterday, Julia reports that Mr. and Mrs. Medeiros arrived at Middlebrook School to pack the donations in a box and truck them to the home in Bridgeport. And it was really humbling and meaningful for the children, we believe, to listen to Mr. and Mrs. Medeiros talk about how important these simple items are to the veterans. And as of today, the donations that Middlebrook students made will be making a difference in the lives of 14 female and 45 male homeless veterans living in the home in Bridgeport. So thank you, Middlebrook, for some very, very good work. Mr. Likely talked about on another lighter note, the spelling bee on Friday night. Tim and Julia and Matt and I attended the WEP spelling bee in the Clune Center. It was because of rescheduling problems, which Kimber Felton, the hardworking, enthusiastic Queen Bee, as she is known. That's not her term she made up, but what she really was for this. She tried about a year ago to make sure there would be no conflicts for this event, and due to the storm, we ended up with children's theater, a play at the high school, a football game, and the spelling bee. So despite great efforts on Kimber's part and great planning, Sandy threw us a bit of a curveball. She was assisted by a terrific team of WEF volunteers, committee chairs that worked with her: Heidi von Hoffman, Tori Clancy, Heather Borden-Hervey, Laura Lynn Cropper, Julie Steckel, Matt Hepfer, and Chris Brown. I'd like to point out Matt did a terrific job with the technology. He's so creative. He used both smartboard and iPad technology, and it really made for a very interesting program and some very creative things that came out of this. Speaking of creativity, some of the names of the teams I thought was wonderful. The Legislative Bees, we had Gail Lavelle and Tony Boucher and Tom O'Day, I believe. We had the Buzz Killers, the Junior Class Worker Bees, the Cider Mill Swarm. I think the Middlebrook team was Honey in the Brook.
Sweet honey.
Sweet Honey in the Brook. The Bees Knees. And I thought the Parent Advisory Board had a team featuring Ann Paul and two wonderful members of our Parent Advisory Board. They call themselves the PA Bees. And the Stingers. So it was a great night. And again, thanks to Kimber.
Is there a declared winner?
Beg your pardon?
Is there a declared winner?
There was a winner. There was, and I don't. I have the team.
The Buzz Killers?
Buzz Killers won?
Was it Buzz Killers?
The Buzz Killers.
The Buzz Killers. Okay. And the words, I might add that the words selected were words that many of us have never seen or used and probably will never see again. But it was pretty impressive to see how it was a lot of fun. So thank you, Kimber, for, in addition to being president of the Miller Driscoll PTA, she made time to do this. And it was a terrific night, and we hope it's the first annual, and that next year we'll have another event. Earlier we spoke about the calendar. Director of Human Resources and General Administration Jane Anderson spoke, and she will be working with the principals on some recommendations for modification to the 2013-14 calendar the board approved last May. We want to look specifically at the parent conference days and try to come up with something that will be clear and predictable, and that will address some of the concerns that have been voiced. So we will be coming back to the board in December with some recommendations on how to proceed with that. But we will be working with Julia and Jenny and Cheryl on that issue, and we will come back and speak to you again in December on this.
Would that be able to include also the backup plan for?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
one of the things that
Yeah.
Bruce and I had talked about a little bit was trying to come up with something so that there is some greater predictability in an unpredictable world. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
finally, in athletics, I generally don't spend a lot of time because the papers do such a terrific job with athletics, but I want to acknowledge at this point, as the fall seasons are coming to an end, the several groups. The boys soccer competed in the quarterfinals in soccer, but unfortunately lost to Newtown. The girls soccer made it to the state quarterfinals, where they lost to Eastline 2-1. The girls field hockey beat Guilford 3-0 and captured the Class M state championship. The girls there's a theme here. The girls cross-country team won the state championship in cross-country, and the varsity football team beat Fairfield Ward on Friday night and will host Trinity Catholic in the annual Thanksgiving Turkey Bowl game, which is here at 10:30 on Thursday morning. So again, a very successful season for our high school athletes and in all areas. But I wanted to acknowledge that this evening.
Thank you very much.
The one other item that I want to highlight is Mr. O'Donnell invited me to come was it Thursday, Bob? Thursday to the gym, and he said we're going to have a special event, and we went there, and we were met by the senior class. A good portion of our band was there, and they were there, and she didn't know it, to honor Casey Pearsall, a terrific Wilton High School young woman, senior, a great athlete in soccer, basketball, and lacrosse. Casey had been nominated for the Lindy's High School Heisman Award, and it's a very prestigious award honoring high school scholar athletes, and Casey is a scholar athlete in the truest sense of the word. She is an outstanding student. She is a credible, humble leader of teams. She is so highly regarded by the young people on our campus, and she really represents what you hope all student athletes would be. And so she came, and what she didn't know, though, is that she has become one of 12 national finalists, 6 boys and 6 girls, young men and 6 young women in the U.S. who will be competing for the High School Heisman Award. And I gather that they get to be part of the ESPN Heisman Weekend, and it was really a thrill. Her parents were hidden in the back in the athletic director's office, and they brought them out, and it was really a very special event. And Casey was mortified because she does not go after attention that the ESPN camera crew followed her around the high school. I might add that a lot of the high school classmates were loving it, wanting to have the opportunity to be a part of all that. But we really congratulate her, and we wish her the best, because she's truly an outstanding young woman.
Well, thank you very much. We now move on to committee reports. Laura, anything to report?
Well, you know that we've been working on this participation fee study, Laura and I, and we'd like to request that we be put on the agenda for December, and we can share, if that's possible, or it needs to be after that, we can share our results. But I know there's been a lot of talk, so let me just give you a little preview of remind you what it was. Over the past few months, we've examined the participation fee issue. We undertook this study as a way to better educate ourselves about the issue and to understand how the issue is addressed by other Durg A districts. Throughout last year's budget discussion, the participation fee came up repeatedly. Anticipating that we will again be asked to consider this as a source of revenue, we wanted to establish a fact-based analysis of the issue. In doing so, we set forth a few parameters for the scope of our work. One, we would limit our study to fees collected at the high school level. We just, as we got into this, we just realized, you got to cut it off somewhere, otherwise it just becomes too large. We would not seek to take a position on the issue. Our purpose was strictly to gather facts. We also decided to approach the topic from two angles, to look at the current Durg A practices for athletic programs and to look at fees currently paid by Wilton parents. So there's still some gaps in our information that we're waiting to receive, otherwise we would have been prepared earlier, but hopefully by next month we'll have all those that information for you. So
Thank
more
you.
to come.
Thank you. Toilets?
Toilets? Is that your new nickname?
I'm like Queen Bee.
I know, that's why. But that's a throne, right? Oh.
Okay. Yesterday morning, a manager from Turner, Dr. Richards, John Murphy, Bill Brennan, and I interviewed the two firms that are the finalists to do the design work on the high school and Millbrook restroom renovations. We have heard back from both of those firms, and we now have everything that we need. They've answered all of our questions, and we expect to make a final decision on the 29th as to who will be awarded that contract.
Thank you. Gil?
Nothing.
At this point, we move on to the Wilton High School World Language Course Sequencing, being presented by Mr. Canny and Mr. O'Donnell. And it's on the agenda tonight for review and discuss.
And Ms. Cordes and Mr. Webster accompanying us this evening.
Well, I'm proud to introduce our high school world language team, of course led by Principal Bob O'Donnell, who the board may recognize as fluent in multiple languages. So he certainly has earned and garnered the respect of our world language teachers. We have spent the last year working on and studying our Spanish sequence at the high school. And this initiative has to a large extent been led by Scott Webster in his instructional leadership role. And as a result of this work, there are recommendations that we would like to put forward to the board as an information item that could have implications down the road. So we felt it was our obligation to share with you our thoughts about some ideas that we have around our program. And I'll turn it over now to the high school team and Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Candy. You've had the chance to look at our proposal, and essentially what we're proposing is a new course sequence in honors and world languages. And the catalyst for this is essentially the numbers in Spanish language, students who are highly capable, who have experience enrichment opportunities, and really are capable of doing more ultimately with the language, which ultimately will land us in a discussion around AP Spanish literature. And what we did was we presented a little bit of data in the packet, and just to cite some of this data, in 2010 we had 7 sophomores and juniors who essentially maxed out in Spanish AP language. We have sophomores who are finishing earlier, juniors are finishing earlier. In 2011 we had 6 students who maxed out, and in 2012 we had 4 students who maxed out. So it's important to point out, as you can imagine, these students, in spite of the fact that these are sophomores and juniors who are taking these tests earlier, they did quite well. The data speaks that they performed quite well on the exams. So, as you know, we listen to our students at Wilton High School, and we canvassed some of these students, particularly this 2011 cohort, and they did indeed indicate an interest, if they were afforded the opportunity, to pursue, ultimately, an AP Spanish literature course. They would be interested in continuing. We also know from our experience in our high-performing district and from our school counselors and our families that colleges do like to see 4 years of the same language, and that will be preferable to our students. So that's all relevant information in this particular case here. So what we wanted to do, Mr. Canty alluded to this a little bit, is be very transparent. What we would propose at this point is that we would have an accelerated language track in the Spanish language, and we'll talk a little about the other languages in terms of access and equity in a minute. But what we would do is we would, and Mr. Webster will talk about the process, identify students who will be capable of successfully pursuing this track that ultimately would land in the AP Spanish literature environment. And what we would do is we would look at compacting and accelerating the curriculum in the sophomore year based upon a test and teacher recommendation, and essentially look at a curricular experience that would lead to the possibility for these students to take AP Spanish language in the junior year and AP Spanish literature in the senior year. So, we really look at it as a win-win for the right students, and we feel that, along the lines of rigor and trying to maximize these students' language opportunities, I think it's important to note that we have what I might describe as prodigies in the arts and music, and there are language prodigies out there, and we have a lot of very capable students. Along those lines, we feel strongly that it should not, your path to an honors course in world language should not be dictated by the choice of the language that you make. So if you look at the sequence, and we'll present this a little bit, our vision would be that we would also offer in the level 4 honors courses in Latin and in German, so that students would ultimately have the opportunity in these two cases in the senior year, because these students, of course, begin their language experience at the high school. We begin German, we begin Latin at the high school, and these students would also have an opportunity, parallel to these Spanish students, to have an opportunity for the honors course, which would be a rich learning experience in their senior year, and also, certainly we feel would be appropriate as something on their transcript as they approach the college process through certainly the first semester of their senior year. So in summary, we wanted to be very clear that this would, in the 2015-16 school year, we'd be looking at an environment where we'd be offering AP Spanish literature. We believe we could offer this without increasing FTE. If you have the vision for compacting this curricular sequence into the 2 years, you're regaining it a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about, we'd have to once again let the students speak and see which students would choose to pursue this, but Mr. Webster and Ms. Cordes have done very thoughtful work about the process here, and we're going to let Mr. Webster talk a little bit about, particularly with the Spanish language, what that would look like and where we envision this may land.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us here tonight. We appreciate it. So again, the driving force is based upon the fact that at the upper levels in all of our languages, we see a greater disparity among students to their ability to grasp advanced topics and progress through the language at different paces. And as a response, we see the need to really increase the rigor in an already challenging language curriculum. In Spanish in particular, we've seen, just given the high populations of students taking the language, the need to really do this, as we see more students maxing out after their junior year. There's no place for them to go. But as these guys mentioned, we need to really provide them with a solid experience in the same language prior to their college experience. So we'd like to condense Spanish 4 and 5 in the sophomore year. It's the logical place to do it, so that they can move into AP language and ultimately, as Bob mentioned. The plan to identify these students is based on, it's a comprehensive effort among all Spanish teachers. It's based on several criteria, one being the teacher's recommendation, also the first semester grades, and also a carefully calibrated rubric to assess the 4 critical skill areas through the midterm examination, as well as speaking and writing performance-based tasks. We would also propose this, as Bob mentioned, in Latin and German, also in French, to provide equity and access. And all languages are on the same board in terms of identifying these students using that same process in terms of grades, teacher recommendations, and the midterm examination. And stay tuned in 2 years for our AP Lit presentation.
And that's just a summary point. That's, again, the reason we're here is to suggest to the board that this process does lead to a new course proposal 3 years out. And we can assure the board that we feel completely confident that we can do so without increasing FTE, that the size of the cohort would simply match existing FTE deployments to support our Spanish students. So we don't feel as though we're triangulating a future board in this matter as it relates to staffing.
Questions?
Would you do any evaluation down at the middle school level? Would you start there? Or would you wait until the student reached high school?
Yeah, we'd like to wait till the high school
Okay.
level that we can really evaluate them better once they get here.
Is that what, that it's not till sophomore year the honors
sophomore year,
classes appear?
right? Because then we
Okay.
really have a good foundation for their skills in terms of freshman year.
To make a sound recommendation for which is a very important sequence, they'd have them essentially for the first semester in Spanish 3. You get a sense for students' skill sets, learning styles, their capabilities, and then, we feel we could have a really a valid and careful approach to recommend the right students, so that essentially you want to set them up for success throughout the 4-year sequence. So we feel that first semester is important, working with the students.
Okay.
What are we doing now with the students that sort of max out at their sophomore and junior year in Spanish? What?
Well, these tend to be
choose them?
students, who take multiple languages, and they will
So
start another
progress with
language.
Latin or German?
Yeah, right.
They choose a different language. Yeah.
They don't have the opportunity to do like an independent study in their senior year with Spanish?
We have offered independent studies. At one point, historically, there was a critical mass of students, but I think we need to recognize that if you have high numbers, it's a significant undertaking. If you have, for example, 8 to 10 students in AP Spanish Lit, which is, of course, a very rigorous curricular sequence, the stakes are higher. Ultimately, these students will sit for the exam, and we feel that with the right decisions now and planning for it in this sophomore year, you can have a carefully and well-prepared cohort that can proceed and be successful on the exam, and really just set the students up for success.
I have 2 questions. You mentioned ensuring equity and access across all 4 languages. Is that there now? And if it's not, is there a cost that we don't currently have budgeted to get there?
I think it is there now. I think to one response to the question is ultimately what we would do is, Spanish, we have the numbers right now, and if we pursue this course sequence, you're going to have a solid cohort of students. The vision for these other languages would be you would essentially have smaller numbers, so they may indeed be in combined classes. You could have a German 4 class. I won't cite data, but you'd have certain students who have qualified who would be in the honors designation and have an honors course designation, and in French and in Latin. So certainly I think, realistically and along the lines of transparency, there would be some, additional enrichment materials that we would need in these areas. But that would provide them all the opportunity, as I said, to pursue an honors opportunity.
And as an appendix to Bob's comments, I think it's important that the public recognizes that in the French language, which students begin study very early on in the elementary and middle school years, there isn't an AP literature course offered in French. So the group looked very closely at equity in terms of our French cohort. What we've decided to do there is, as Mr. Webster alluded to, is offer an honor sequence for our French students going into the sophomore year, as we will with our Spanish students. So we feel we're providing an equitable experience both to French and Spanish students.
You mentioned full disclosure. I'll disclose that I've taken French, Spanish, and German and excelled at none of them. But
Right teachers.
You mentioned condensing.
It's true. It's true.
You mentioned condensing 4 and 5. Do you foresee that putting pressure on some kids that may not be gifted and, in effect, force them out of a language?
No, because they're actually going to have 3 different paths to choose from their sophomore year. So if they're not quite ready to condense, and if they're content staying with the same, progression, and they're already taking too many other accelerated courses their sophomore year, they can simply take 4 honors. So they can still be given that designation.
Wonderful.
I have a general question about the sequencing. It appears from the chart on page 3 of your report that a student can no longer begin French or Spanish at the high school. You can't take French 1 or Spanish 1.
You can't take French 1 anymore.
You can't take
at the
French
high
1,
school.
you
You may
can begin Spanish 1.
You may recall we phased out
Yes,
French starting in ninth grade because of insufficient enrollment.
Right.
But Spanish can still be an option for
Okay.
students to begin in ninth grade.
and then Russian's been phased out entirely.
That is accurate.
And then Greek remains an independent
It
study.
remains an independent study and a viable one.
And continuing on that vein, has there been any movement again towards Mandarin Chinese, which we looked at? Have you had any comments or requests from the students?
We have not.
No.
Any other questions?
Just again to repeat. So the French, the reason why French doesn't show AP Loadshow, there's no class.
Doesn't
Correct.
exist. It used to exist.
Oh,
but
it didn't? It doesn't-
Not anymore
Just
because
because
of
the
the-
numbers?
Numbers, yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll get my agenda. Next on the agenda is Policy and Regulation 5147, Suicide Prevention and Intervention. This is on for review and discuss.
A hard transition to make, clearly, to come to the table with this. Of the many responsibilities with which we are entrusted as educators, support staff, and administrators, there is none more serious than intervening and protecting students from suicidal ideation and suicide. It is a topic which, while evoking emotional responses from all of us, school staff and parents alike, nevertheless, we are required to plan and institute proactive measures to minimize the risk of injury to our students. Although it is required that the board have a policy pertaining to suicide prevention and intervention, the content is not prescribed by law. The document in front of the board tonight includes the required policy and regulations which attempt to delineate the practices to be followed in the most frequent scenarios involving students thinking or attempting to commit suicide. The procedures outlined are the work of the district's social workers, and they are truly a group of highly skilled, well-trained professionals with a very strong commitment to the well-being of their students. And I've invited two members of the group to be with me tonight, the famous Kim Simo from high school, who is really one of the pillars of our mental health team in this district, and we are forever appreciative of Kim's work. And Kathy Weiss, her colleague with a wonderful set of clinical skills and commitment to her students, and Kathy is at Middlebrook. On a frequent, increasingly frequent basis, both Kim and Kathy have been called upon to address these issues related to suicide and to offer support to families and school staff as they develop interventions. And it is unfortunate that we say with increasing frequency. So we invite your questions, however you'd like to proceed.
Gildy, anything to start with?
Well, I know when we talk about prevention, what are you doing in the areas of prevention, the training for the students and for the staff?
That's a great question. Just in terms of staff, we do a presentation each year to the faculty to talk about warning signs, what to look for in your students, if you see warning signs, how to respond, and what type of interventions are available. So it's a good reminder each year to staff in terms of signs and symptoms to look for, because our teachers are the first line of defense. And then we have a variety of things in the high school. It's curriculum-based in terms of our health curriculum, where we do teach students about warning signs and symptoms and how to access services within the school. Oftentimes, our mental health staff will come in to do part of that unit. We have a peervention program at the high school where we do a specific training. We spend a whole unit on suicide and really teaching students. They're our first line of defense, and oftentimes kids will go to students before they'll come to adults, especially with technology today. Things are put on Facebook and texting, so really teaching students how to respond. That's not information they can keep confidential. And that's another a good tool that we use in high school. We also have our advisory program this year, which, the goal around that is so every student in the school has an adult in the building that they can talk to. So we hope that that is another way of making those connections. And we focus on issues not specific to suicide, but certainly around decision making and things of that nature. So in terms of a high school, that's our focus.
At the middle school, we have teams, so the teams meet daily to talk about any social, emotional, or academic difficulties. As well, on a weekly basis, a member of the mental health team or the guidance team comes to those meetings to discuss any concerns or issues. There's a developmental guidance program, and they go into the classes and teach their students 12 times per year and talk about the communication and seeking adults when needed. And I would agree with what Kim said. I think kids talk to kids. So they really stress that communication and reaching out to adults when needed. They also discuss the warning signs that would lead someone to feeling overwhelmed or being, feeling suicidal or depressed. At the same time, they also teaching stress management techniques in their life classes. And then I do many groups throughout the school most often with the guidance counselors, where we teach, coping skills and building resiliency that are developmentally appropriate for middle school kids. So that's probably the main things that we do.
And did you mention the faculty meeting?
Oh, yeah, and we also do, as a matter of fact, it's next week. We're going to be doing a faculty meeting where Kim and I together are going to be training the staff.
Karen, Lori?
So much to really take in. Reading through the packet, it was really quite overwhelming, all these steps and that sort of thing. When is the training that you do, Kim, that you said once a year? Is it pretty much the same
For the faculty?
Mm-hmm.
We try to do it early in the school year. It's hard sometimes to get on the agendas, but we have not done ours yet, but we will be doing it. Hopefully, our faculty meetings, weather has an issue this year, but we try to do it as early as possible.
And you don't see a need at this point to go any lower than middle school as far as this type of focus?
Our primary attention right now is at the secondary level.
Okay.
We have really very skilled school psychologists and mental health teams, and they're very attuned to listen. But the primary emphasis is at the secondary level.
We see a lot in the press about the connection between bullying and suicide attempts. Do you see that connection here?
I don't think that's the primary issue. We see students, I'll speak for Kim and Kathy, and they can join in. I think we see students struggling with depression, anxiety, difficulty coping as being the primary issues that are putting them most at risk.
When you notify the parents that they have a child that you consider to be at risk, you're getting good cooperation from the parents, or are they denial?
There's always it's a very difficult phone call to make. It's a difficult process to go through. I think there's work not only to do with the child but with the families in terms of understanding. Oftentimes there may have been signs, but when you take a step back and pull it all together, so helping a family through that. But I would say almost all the time there's cooperation.
And you had said that it was required that we have a policy, but they don't really give you any boilerplate or whatever to use. So in developing this, is this basically based on what you're currently doing, what your current practice is, or did it become more extensive in the development of this policy?
I think the social workers in developing the regulation section of it tried to put together what they felt would be most helpful for the schools. That is, this is the first time I think there's such a clear delineation of the practices and procedures to be followed in the, again, as I said in the opening remarks, our most frequent scenarios. If it happens during the school day, if it happens after school hours. So this is the work of current practice and what we think is best practice. Almost the manual for the steps to follow. And I think the social workers felt a need to really put this in writing and make it very clear.
There's one point we were talking about when you go to notify the parents, if the parents are unable to come to school, but you're going to provide them with information about resources over the telephone. And I'm wondering if that's just a holdover from when these regs were just originally written, which was 21 years ago.
That's under the at-risk. Certainly, I think in terms of the way they're written, every effort is made to get the parents in. If it's an imminent situation, the parent really has to be in or will transport to the hospital if someone needs an immediate assessment.
Okay, I'm just thinking about myself. If I'm suddenly told that there's something wrong with my child, what you're telling me is probably going to go in one ear and out the other, so that if I had some sort of written follow-up of what you told me that I need to do would be helpful.
I see what you're saying. Okay. In terms of creating a document?
Just maybe creating an email saying these are the agencies that you might want to follow up with.
That. Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of thing.
We can certainly add in that it's followed up with a written communication with the parent.
Just have a question on the last page of the regulation. Under there's a step for the out-of-school attempt about sharing information with the principal of the sibling schools, and that was the first, the only time that appeared. I wonder, is that something you only do in that particular situation if it's an out-of-school attempt, or do you try to communicate with the principals no matter whether they're, whatever stage you're seeing the student? I'm not putting that well, but
Well, if I understand your question, I think in all the practices surrounding this, we operate on a need-to-know basis. So we want to be very mindful and thoughtful about how much we share and with whom we share. And that's why we operate on the need to know. If we thought that there would be an impact on the family, or maybe that student who's at risk had shared something that we felt the principal needed to know, we would do that. But as it is with most of the world that I deal with, everything's on an individual basis. Well, it's true. Let's just be honest. It just is what it is.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a discussion of the current and proposed future kindergarten programs by Dr. Richards and Mrs. Jensen-Garner.
Right. Tonight, we would like to share some thoughts with the board about some changes, as you mentioned, that we would like to make to our Walton Public Schools kindergarten program. As you know, the issue of instructional time has been the focus of our attention in the state and in the nation for quite some time now. And this, as you also know, has coincided with a set of evolving Common Core curriculum standards and some changing practice in schools around the country. So I'm really pleased. I think we're very fortunate tonight to have Cheryl Jensen-Garner here to speak on how we would like to reshape our kindergarten program. I want to point out, I'm pleased our entire administrative team is here, Dr. Sheila Brown and Ms. Leslie Pearson, who are terrific assistant principals working at North Driscoll. So they're here with Cheryl, and we have some thoughts we want to share with you tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, and wasn't sure where the remote was. I know where the PowerPoint is. I've been looking at it for an hour and a half. I'm very excited to be here tonight to be talking about this potential expansion of our program. As you see, it is entitled Full Day Kindergarten Expanding Learning Opportunities. So I assure you, you've seen the PowerPoint. I won't go through each little point, but I do want to go through enough of it to talk about why we're looking at this change and some of the questions that might arise as a result.
It's on the side. On the side. There you go. Push down.
This is why I always like having Matt or Tim in the room when we're doing
Yeah, well, we don't have a one that looks like this. If you push enough buttons, you're going to find the right one.
That's the other button she pushed.
Okay, I did all of what I know. He does all of what he knows. Now we're done.
Now we bring Matt.
Change the slide.
How many administrators?
Oh, okay. How many administrators does it take to change their PowerPoints?
Reminds me of my opening faculty convocation speech.
Oh, I hope not.
Unforgettable moments.
That was pretty good. I liked your Millie Vanilli headset that one year too, though.
Yeah.
Go down. Go down.
Got it. Yay. So, in any case, this is just the overview, the agenda of what we're going to talk about. So just very quickly through this, some background about where the nation and the state stand in terms of full-day kindergarten, understanding that the landscape has changed everywhere, not just here. And so that is some of the genesis of what we're looking at as well. There are a number of supporting documents that we have in here as well. Another thing is what is different about full-day kindergarten. That it would be a very automatic question. Why full day? What are the benefits for students, teachers, and parents? What the recommendation looks like, why we do this. Then talking about the 21st century standards, and then what are the characteristics of an effective kindergarten program. One of the things that comes up is this is not just about extending a day and then just making a longer day. It's really about what that day would look like as well. So there are national trends that give us some background for this as well. I think it's pretty interesting that it has very quickly changed over just the last few years, both nationally and in the state. In the early 80s, about 30% of the children attended full-day programs. By 2005, we have more states that are requiring full-day kindergarten and funding for full-day kindergarten. It's notable that many of the major obstacles are related to funding. One of the things that we'll talk about as we go through is that this might not necessarily be the case going to a program that we're going to. It's harder for me to see that TV than this one, but I sort of remember it. All-day kindergarten is not only gaining momentum in the nation, it is gaining momentum in the state as well. And again, in 2006, about 52 out of, I think it was 163 districts in this state offered full-day kindergarten. By now, 99 districts in the state are, oh, I do have it, thank you. That would have been a good idea to open that. Thank you. Offering full-day kindergarten in this state. I think one of the notable things is just since last year, about 20 districts have gone to full day. And they are all over the landscape. Some of them were half day and some of them were extended day and different versions of that. I'm going to go through a couple of these. Right. I'm going to go through a couple of these slides to relate back to that other slide. So this is kindergarten in the state, and this is a visual to show the red are the full day kindergarten. The brown are extended day, which is what we would have. The green is half day, and there are 4 orange that aren't as noticed here, but they have full day for over half of the students. And a lot of that is because of space and because of funding things, and they do a lottery system, and many of them are going in that direction. And I am talking about the previous slide, but I'm using the visual instead. Kindergarten in Fairfield County, there are 23 districts in Fairfield County. Of those 23 districts, 16 of them have full day. You will see that's the red. Then you see 3 have half day, that's the blue. 2 have extended day, that's us. And 2 have, most of them have full day. They're going to a full day. If we look in our DRG, you can see on this visual that of the 9 districts, most of them have full day. Wilton and Westport do not, and Westport has a sort of full day. They have a more extended day than we do. They just have another component. What they do is they have 3 days that are full days for all the children, and then they have 2 extended days. And a couple of these districts have had it for a while, and a couple of the districts, some of the districts have had it for a while. I think one of the things to note as we look at this, Weston had extended day. They've gone to full day just this year. We've had some of the other ones. New Canaan went a few years ago. Ridgefield went just a year or 2 ago. In the last slide where we saw the Fairfield County, several of those just did it this year and last year.
Just to clarify, half day, can you just, what's the difference between half day and extended day versus full day?
Great question.
Yeah,
I'll go
okay.
back. I will
Okay.
Go back to that.
awesome.
A half day is half day every day for all the children.
Okay.
And versions of half days they end at different times. It can be anywhere from 2.5 hours to 4.5 hours. What they talk about is in terms of minutes. They say it's more than 450, but less than 900 minutes. And so, I mean, that everything in
'Cause we all keep
these
time
are
that way.
about minutes.
Yeah, sure, right.
And a year.
Days are really long.
And and then extended day is in the middle. So extended day is what we have. What we have is 3 half days and 2 long days, which happens to be Tuesday, Thursday, half the children are there for
Right.
the other part of the afternoon, and Wednesday, Friday, children are there for half the day. Half the day, 2 days a week. And then Mondays, none of the children are there, half the day.
So ours is considered a half-day extended day program.
They just call it extended day.
Extended day, okay.
In the research, many of the things you read about say they don't just stipulate between a half day, extended day, and somewhere in between. Much of the research, and you will notice in many of the slides, I refer to all day, every day. Because that is where they draw the line. They talk about there's half day and there's full day. And if you have somewhere in the middle, it's not full day. So they consider it somewhere around half day. And honestly, there's very little research that's done about extended day. And so that's why many of the states that talk about it talk about all day, every day. So that's a lot of what I refer to when I go through this. In the next one of our guiding documents is something was done, I think it was in around 2005. This is a document called Ready by 5, Fine by 9. What it mainly says, it's talking about early childhood. And it's a document that says that children need to have preschool and they need to be ready to go to school by the time they come. There's certain things that you should have in place for preschools. So they're talking about preschool standards. Then Fine by 9 means that by the time they're 9, they should be able to read and do all of the kinds of things that you should be able to do in early childhood. So this is an early childhood document. You will notice that one of the things that it says is to provide high-quality environments that recognize individual rates of growth and to provide comprehensive programs and services to all children. And they talk about making sure that all children have all the things that they need in place by the time they're 9. And they recommend in many of these documents that the way to do that is to extend their time. If you have more time, you have more possibility to have better programming. That by itself doesn't. Then in the next one, what is different in full-day kindergarten? Many people ask, well, why would you do that? Why would you go from a half day to a full day? So one of the things that's the primary thing is you're not going to necessarily do more academics. You're not going to try to do heavier academics. The Connecticut Common State Standards have already been written. Connecticut Common Standards that have been written for this state and for other states at which we have adopted in 2010 have been written for full-day kindergarten. So we're trying to condense what we do in a shorter day. So when you look at a lot of these things, almost everything says more time. So if you have more time in school, you have more time to do a number of things. It doesn't mean that we're going to make it a heavier day for the students. It means that it's an unhurried setting and fewer transitions. One of the notable things about extended day is the number of transitions that children have. Every single day they have a major transition in the middle of the day, whether they're staying or they're going home. It is daily direct instruction in literacy and math and day-to-day continuity. An example of that would be if a child is in a Tuesday-Thursday class and they have their little reading group in the afternoon on Tuesday and they have it on Thursday. The next time they'll see that group doing those things is the following Tuesday. So from Thursday to Tuesday, you don't have the same continuity of instruction. Same thing, of course, for the Wednesday-Friday group. It also gives more in-depth opportunities across the day so that you're more flexible across the day to do different things. We've talked and we've had conversations at the building level, and what it does is it gives you the opportunity to do some of those heavier academic subjects in the morning and ease off perhaps in the afternoon, which is really more developmentally appropriate for some of the smaller children. It gives you the opportunity to give more scheduling. For instance, if children need intervention, if children need special needs classes, you don't have to do them all in the morning or if they're only there on their half days. So it gives them more flexibility across the day. It gives them another very notable thing is it's more developmentally appropriate. It gives one of the things that preschool always complains about when children go from preschool to kindergarten is that they don't have the opportunity for those play experiences. They don't have the opportunity to have unstructured and free expression times. They have them, but they're very minimal. They're much shorter. So one of the things that we would do in a full-day program is have it developmentally appropriate across the day. The next one, why should a child attend full day? Many of the same kinds of things. If you look at the very first one up there, it's marked by a balance of students' intellectual, academic, social and emotional, physical and behavioral characteristics. Again, part of that, a developmentally appropriate kind of thing that you're looking for a small child. Children are exposed to extensive vocabulary. If they're around playmates, age mates, the teachers consistently and every day, they have the opportunity to expand the vocabulary. And I think most people are aware that so much of your vocabulary is developed by the time you are the age of 5. And then in that kindergarten year, it's very important to continually establish that vocabulary, and so that they have that robust vocabulary and opportunities to hear and learn from the language. And then that builds on into the next couple of years, well, all their next years, but the next couple of years that they're with us. It also helps us to adequately address the frameworks that are in place. The Common Core Learning Standards are pretty extensive. And as I said before, they are written with the idea that it's a full-day program. And then the last one, an all-day program, will relax the tension between the academic standards and developmentally appropriate instruction, allowing a reasonable amount of time for each pursuit. So the balance is the very important thing that we look at in a full-day kindergarten. And then what does the research show? Anecdotally, people know how their child did in kindergarten, they know how another child does in kindergarten, they know how their neighbor did, etc. But the research is very helpful in looking at, when you saw those maps, you saw how many states and districts have gone to full day. So if you look at some of the research, it tells us that early intervention with literacy-rich and numeracy-rich programs allow long-lasting improvements. The research is all over the place with some of it, and the more current research indicates that it's at least through the age of grade 3 and 4. So if they get that real boost through those early grades, that'll hit the road running, and then they can continue on as they get to 3rd and 4th grade. There's more time to enhance the literacy instruction. We always talk when our parents come to any of our orientations or we begin anything for kindergarten that literacy is so much the foundation to so much of what we do. The other thing is the early research that was done says children from different socioeconomic levels had different levels of improvement when they went to full day. That is not at all the case. It can help the children that have their gaps in learning, so a lot of districts that are trying to close those achievement gaps, but all the research says that students from all socioeconomic levels benefit from academically and socially from full-day kindergarten. One of the things that they caution is it's not just extra time, but it's what you do with that time, so that the programs must include extensive interactions with peers, with adults, objects, and manipulatives, opportunity to use their hands, to do play-based kinds of things, to have a very flexible, developmentally appropriate all-day-long program. Full day particularly positively impacts behavior. They found in many of the things that if children have a consistent program every day, they know exactly what they're doing, the predictability and consistency makes a difference for children positively in their behavior. And then there is no evidence, this is one of the things that anecdotally can be out there, there's no evidence that a full-day program induces stress or anxiety in children. If you do the appropriate programming, it does not unduly stress them. Quickly going through some of the other kinds of things, there are specific benefits for the students. Obviously, that's our number one target audience, but also for the teachers and the parents as well. If you just look at the underlying things, more opportunities for the kindergarten curriculum to be expanded, we talked about that, creative and enriching experiences, a flexible learning environment. Children have a better opportunity to develop their independence and their creativity. When you see some of these underlying things, you will see many of these are cross-checked with the 21st century skills that we look at. You begin at a very young age, you continue to develop them through their lifelong experience with school, and you see that they begin right here, or even before. Children are less likely to exhibit difficult behaviors. What I talked about the positive behaviors. Obviously, there are fewer transitions. Transitions are difficult. They're difficult for children. They can be difficult for the parents and the teachers as well. And again, the consistency, predictability, and structure, which are important in all things for education. The benefits for the parents, or for the teachers. Less time spent on dismissal transitions. Gives them opportunity to deliver the existing curriculum at a more relaxed pace. When we spoke with the kindergarten teachers, they said, I don't have to rush everything to get it into either it's the morning program or the afternoon short version of the program. Gives this as an opportunity to have lunch at a more appropriate time of the day. Gives an opportunity for the children to have, as I said, that lack of transition in the middle of the day. It gives them the opportunity to have specials if we need to in the afternoon, rather than the first thing in the morning at 9:10, which many of the children have to do. More flexibility in the scheduling. And it prepares the transitions to first grade. Much of the research showed that the children, instead of having a major transition in first grade, they had that transition and appropriately done so through kindergarten. Benefits for parents, a few obvious things. It would assist parents in providing appropriate afternoon activities. They don't have to find something that's appropriate for the children to do. Many of these children are coming from a preschool where they spend all day in preschool. Now we're reducing the program, and we're saying now you look for something for them to do on the afternoons. And parents do that. They have play dates. They're very happy doing that. But this is a very consistent program if they do not need to do that. All the siblings, if they're there, and we do have a number of children with siblings in the building, they all have the same schedule in that building. across the district that have different schedules, obviously, but in that building they wouldn't be different. I'll tell you, this week was quite confusing for them. It is the reassurance that all the children receive the same in-school hours. With that difference between the Tuesday, Thursday, and the Wednesday, Friday, invariably one calendar year you'll have more Tuesday, Thursdays than you have Wednesday, Fridays. The same as half-day people find, the morning you have more that they cancel because they have late dismissal in the morning than in the afternoon. It eliminates the need for parents to find something appropriate for the children to do in the afternoon in terms of childcare. More working parents. More parents that just want them doing something structured in the afternoon. So the recommendations for full days are to meet student academic needs, and I've talked about most of those. To meet physical needs, gives them the opportunity to have more gross motor skills. It's the recess, the opportunities every day, the phys ed, that sort of thing that they would have just as they have in first and second grade. Gives them the fine motor skills. One of the things that kindergartners more so we've noticed in the last 10 years, children don't seem to have the same development of fine motor skills that they once did. They're probably not doing as many puzzles and those things, but they can really move those iPads nicely. But it gives them extended practice in the classroom. Everybody that's been a parent knows that when a child is trying to practice on their own, they like to practice the wrong way. They don't like to practice the right way. In kindergarten, children will tell you, you're not my teacher if you're the parent that's telling them you can't go, bottom to up. They'll say, well, you're not my teacher, because teacher is very important in the life of a small child. That changes somewhere along the line. Just like parents change somewhere along the line. And it gives the opportunity to meet students' social and emotional needs, and I did talk about those as well. Just just a little bit on this, meeting the 21st century standards. As I related before, the Common Core state standards have already been written. They are written in mind with full-day kindergarten. There are at least 25 standards that are written that would have once been a first grade standard that's now a kindergarten standard. There are 22 standards that might have been first or second but are now kindergarten. Now, it's developmentally appropriate for that age, but they're already writing more, and they can do it. That's the thing that's really, really so exciting about children. If they can do it in 2 long days, they can certainly do it in 5 long days. Just anecdotally, I was in a classroom this afternoon, and I was in there, the teacher had to do something, so I was just there like the last 15 minutes. The children were sharing, and they were doing writing, and it's so exciting to see the kinds of things that they do. And, they're all over the ballpark in what they can do, but they all catch up to each other eventually. So it's very exciting what they can do when they're given the opportunity. Sometimes we shortchange children, thinking that they can't do things that they really can do. So one of the things that I spoke about before, the characteristics of effective full-day kindergarten, everything says it's just not more time, it's what you do with the time. And I think we realize that. So the quality of the curriculum instruction is as important as the length of the school day. We have wonderful teachers. They've done us well all these years. They could continue doing well all these more years on the extended day. But we look at it as it's time that we change with what everybody else is doing. I heard Carrie at the beginning say progressive, creative, and proactive. And that's what we're looking at, to doing this kind of thing. We want to extend. So an effective full-day program provides an environment that favors a child-centered, developmentally appropriate setting. You're probably so tired of hearing me say that just in the 20 minutes I've been standing here. It integrates past experiences with new experiences, emphasizes the language development and literacy, involves children in first-hand experiences in all the things that they do, informal interactions with objects, other children, and adults, a balance of small group, large group, and independent activities. Gives an opportunity to assess them throughout a day. Most of a teacher's assessment is done observation. Absolutely. Obviously we do formal and informal assessments, but most of the assessment that you do with a small child is your day-to-day observation. If you have a consistent day-to-day observation of that, you can assess that through close observation, systematic collection, and examination of students' work. And it develops his children's social skills, including conflict resolution, gives them the opportunity to be with age mates, solve problems, do it on their own, step in when you need, structured and unstructured play. The last thing for this is what would be next steps. These are not limited to these, but these would be some of the next steps that we would look at if we were to pursue a full-day program in this district. We would do a coordination of teacher administrator visits to other districts. We have rich districts around us as well, that some of them have been in this as long as 8 years and more. Some of them have only gone, a few years ago. Some of them went last year, and a couple went this year. So there are many opportunities for us to have conversation, and professionally districts do that. We've visited other districts for other reasons. That would be a very exciting thing to do. Learn from what they've learned. A collaboration with the kindergarten teachers on development and implementation plan and timeline. A piece of that would be looking at what is an appropriate schedule. How would we build that day? The development and implementation of a parent communication plan. How do we have parents involved in what we're doing and communicate and how that would look and that sort of thing. Planning for a recommendation to the Board of Education for its consideration to approve that if that were the case. The next pages are presentation. These are sources. Some of the sources, there are many, many sources. I must have a stack this big in my office right now. Some of them are long and some of them are short. But I think it's very notable, just one of the things I'll mention about the presentations and the some of these. You see that some of them are presentations and reports that are districts that have shared with us around us. Some of them are professional organizations, the National Education Association, the Ready by 5 and 9 that I said, the National Institute for Early Education Research, CAPS has a position statement, there are many position statements as well. A research and review of the literature of the research. So there are a number of those. Online articles, that's very interesting, just from the state of Connecticut, to see some of the things that they have discussed and gone through with some of those. So they're quite interesting as well. There are a plethora of things. And then finally, as I said, we never shortchange our small children. The kindergarten children are confident in spirit, infinite in resources, and eager to learn. Everything is still possible. And to one of our favorite kindergarten authors, Robert Fulghum, who has said, of course, that everything you need to know you've learned in kindergarten. And we just want to give them the opportunity to learn more over the day. So, with that, questions?
Wonderful. Questions?
Yeah, you haven't indicated anywhere when you might want to implement this.
We would like to implement it. This is something that we do not feel that needs to be dragged out. And we've talked to the teachers, and we've looked at other districts, and we would like to implement it in the fall of 13, or in this next fall. Was that 12, 13, 14? 13, 14. One of the reasons that we would is we are not looking like many districts that have half-day programs. They're looking for a space. We have the space. They're already in the room. They're looking to hire 4 or twice as many teachers or a few more teachers. We have the teachers. We have a curriculum. We have guidelines. We know appropriate things to do, and we have a very experienced staff. We have a lot of information out there that we can draw on, and we have no doubts that it's something that's easy to do and something that we could bring parents in, communicate, and bring them along with the timetable. We do registration in January. Even saying that, registration in January, we also we continue to have questions after that. Way after January. They enroll them and then they decide if they're going to stay there.
Right.
Then, or if it's the following year.
I have 3 questions. First of all, I I just think this is so exciting to see those slides on the benefits to the teachers, the students, and the parents. It's just so exciting, and looking forward to this. I was wondering, as it was presented to the teachers, was there any concern among the teachers? Was there any pushback, or were they all 100% for this?
I'm always hesitant to speak for other people, but I will give you my perception. My perception is some of the things that they said, and there are other people sitting in this room that were there. Some of the things that they said is, we are so rushed to do the things we have to do. The transitions are difficult for children. They would welcome the opportunity to take a look at a schedule and make a better schedule for their day. That consistent, and when I repeated developmentally appropriate a million times, they would say that. They would really look at that as, but I don't think anything they're doing now, they wouldn't say it. It's just more of some things that they're not able to do. Some of them have said that we would have to look at perhaps providing some assistance for the literacy time so that they would have that individual time, which we already do with first and second grade too. So we would, how we would look at that as well. That's really one of the things. We didn't talk about, what are all the nitty-gritty logistics, because we talked about learning from other districts, seeing what they're doing. And as I said, and partially to Karen's question, I have no doubt they're a very creative, very seasoned, very capable group. They can do anything when given a task.
Next question is, I know now, or at least it had been where you started off with everybody, all the kindergartners with a half day, and then at some point
3 weeks.
You had the extended days. And you gave parents at that time a choice, depending on where their child was developmentally, as to whether or not they were ready to go to that extended day or to stay. Will there be a choice, or will this be, this is it, it's the full day program?
I think there are a couple answers.
Okay.
One, I don't have all the answers. Two, we no longer do that, given them a choice.
Okay.
We found that there was so much difference. If the children had a choice, children that had half day and children that had extended day, there was such a big difference in their learning. So we said, you can delay it if you want, but we found people weren't doing that really anymore. People really wanted their child to have an equal opportunity. So I would say, related to that, my goal would be that they would have an equal opportunity. They would all do the same thing, because people very quickly find that if I do a full day and I do a half day, there's a big discrepancy in their opportunities for learning. Decisions, no, those haven't been made. In terms of the beginning of the year, we don't know whether it would be a half day or whether it would be, or whether we'd ease into it.
So you might start.
Again, some districts, they do it the very first day of school. Other districts, they've waited a few weeks. That's...
You'll consider all those options.
Yeah, those are the under consideration thing. We don't have all the...
And the last question, back to the space, you mentioned, the teacher's already in their classroom, but do you foresee any, as we consider what we're going to do with that building at Miller Driscoll, are there any space issues or concerns on your part as it relates to having the kindergartners there full time? Lunchroom, gym use, whatever.
I don't think necessarily more related to the fact that it's full time. My
Okay.
concerns aren't related to full
Okay.
time. It'd be related to whether they're there 5 minutes or not.
Okay. Okay.
I actually did work out some tentative schedules, like how would you do lunch, how would you do recess, those sorts of things. They're workable. We haven't gone down that road, though.
Okay.
If I can just jump in, the intent in bringing this conversation to the board this evening is part of a timeline which started with our meeting with the kindergarten teachers, as Cheryl had pointed out earlier. Today is, this presentation is designed to give you the flavor of where we want to head, and to alert the board that in next month's budget workshop, we'll be bringing to the board a sense of what the budgetary impacts will be for this program. In working with Dr. Richards, our plan will be to bring this proposal to the board in February for their review and discussion and hopefully their approval.
Well, for me, this is an absolute no-brainer, with the exception of what you were just speaking about, on coming back and giving us more information on the logistical issues of transportation, the issues around the WEA, additional cost of materials that will go into that, additional technology-related costs, and then also the suitability of the facility, which you just spoke to. So we look forward to having all those questions answered.
Laura?
This is outside. One of the things you talked about was preschools, and there is a great. There are all sorts of preschools, and what is the role of the grade schools, or for parents to get the preschools on board? Because I imagine as you, depending on what the child's background is, it's going to have an impact. That seems like a lot of the studies talk about the importance of preschool.
I think there are preschool standards written for the state of Connecticut. That's part of that Ready by 5 and 5 by 9. And there are a specific set of preschool standards. Preschools, they operate in a lot of different philosophies. And we have had preschool directors for the last few years. We've had them come to our building. We've spoken to them. We've done a presentation about what does kindergarten look like. What are we doing in kindergarten? We're not telling them that this is what they should do to prepare the children, because the philosophy of kindergarten and the philosophy of schools is we take the children where they come. And it's not that, it's kind of like they talk about the glass slipper. We don't make the glass slipper fit the child. We make it fit. We don't make them fit us. So we have to take them wherever they are. We look at a full-day program as giving us a lot more opportunities to do things like give them intervention and things like that if they need it, or just more language, or all those different kinds of things. Preschools, we would do like we are currently doing. Have them come in and talk about what looks different.
Wonderful. Will your presentation be available on the web by chance?
Absolutely. The orientations and things that we did for kindergarten last year we put online. We'll put this online as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl.
From here we move on to Mr. Canty's class size report. It's on for